What would it profit? Ooh, profit a man to gain this world, lose his soul. No, it ain't worth it. It ain't worth it. Yeah.
The fire is lit, here come the smoke. Bishop brother is on, here come the hope. On the real, oh yeah, this on the real. With Bishop brother, no they never quick to judge it. Plenty covered, yeah they talk about issues from their view. And they welcome all, they're not defined by their hue. Oh no, they're just speaking of their truth. Be sure to like and subscribe and tune in, you see the fire in their eyes.
Occurred to me, but we're in San Antonio, Texas. We've been here. We started this ministry in 2006. It was started over in Kirby. We moved here, and we just hear about the Father's business. In one of my, we won't get to the books, but for us, it's not about religion. It's about relationship. And we're a little small chapel, but you know, it's a place of love. Because I'd rather be around a few people who love God than a bunch of foolishness and mess, and I can be part of that. So I just thank God for that. We have a food pantry here where we've been since 2016. We've been feeding our local community once every month, giving out food to the community. They pay nothing. We ask no questions besides basically what we have to do under the law. Legal questions that the FDA makes us answer, but as far as we have no question to answer. We don't ask them why we don't interrogate them. Why you need it? Why you didn't do it? No, we just try to do what Jesus said. You know, I was hungry, you didn't feed me. If you need food, we're gonna give it out to you. And we've been blessed to do that. And also, I'm an educator. I've been doing that for the last 12 years. That's a ministry in itself.
Yes,
That's a labor of love in
preach.
itself. And I thank God for that. Also, you know, and besides the titles, I'm a humanitarian. It's about humanity. And also, we write books, and I write books, and I think looking back on it, since we did an introduction show, but kind of like back to the introduction, I left kind of this part out. I can think about that point, but now that I'm looking at these books, I'm thinking about. I think that was one of the attractions we had to one another, because you see so many pastors and preachers, but none of them write, and
it's true.
I think that's a missing art within the body of Christ, and I said because of this reason why I said. This is going to sound strange, but if you think about it, it's true. What would we know of the gospel if people didn't write?
That's a fact. You know, the funny thing is,
I mean,
90% of the New Testament are personal letters between people.
Yeah.
So if they didn't actually write down their feelings or how they felt or what was
What if
going on,
Moses didn't write?
we'd have nothing.
We wouldn't have the first 5 books. What do they call it? The
Pentateuch?
Pentateuch. Yeah, we wouldn't have had the first 5 books. He didn't write. The written language is very important, and people ask me why I write. Well, I write because, you know, it's needed, but I write because one day I'm not going to be here. And when you write something and put it in a book, it leaves your words behind for other people to hear. Just like we have the Bible that Paul left 2,000 years ago, and I think that's one of the things that attracts us one another. That not only we're preachers and love God and love the gospel and love church and love all that aspect of it, but we're writers, and I think that really drew us to one another. Like, hey, you know, you write, I write. Yeah, that's good, because I think more preachers need to learn how to write, because when you write, you express yourself on a whole different level. You got to do some research. You got to really take your time and do it. It's a labor, but I tell you, for me, when I wrote my first book, and then particularly my second book, my first book was like kind of like I'm just doing this and see how it works out. But my second one that I wrote was really, actually the third one besides the one I wrote with you. But it was just something about that I really expressed myself in a way that I really wanted to, and it's a fever. It hits you now. Now I got to do it all the time.
Yes.
But writing is good, but I think that was really one of the attractions that, besides everything else, that really brought us together to start this process of what we call Bishop Brothers we do now. So, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the brain is fickle. You know, there's going to come a time where I'm not going to have the facilities that I have now. I'm not going to remember the memories that I have now. I'm not going to remember the theological thought that I had, and, you know, the ability to write it down You know, in Irish culture, we call it a shanachine, right? The storyteller, the keeper of the stories, right? And that person's whole job in ancient Irish community was to keep all the stories, you know, so the king could come to the shanachine and go, hey, do you remember what happened between these two people? And they could tell you, yeah, there was an issue with the farmland, and they had this fight, but this is how it was settled, and, you know, storytelling. It's a huge part of Irish culture, and it's a huge part of who I am. I love to write, but I've been, so I got my start in Christian ministry as a chaplain. I started as actually a sports chaplain. I worked for this minor league team, not even minor league. It was a collegiate summer league team called the Kitsap Blue Jackets. They don't exist anymore. But at the time, I was their chaplain from 2009 to 2016, 7 seasons. And, you know, basically my job was to just be there for these college kids who were learning what it was like to be on a professional circuit and going through the motions and all the stress and the strain that comes with, you know, playing every other night in a new town and that kind of stuff. So that was a great place for me. And then I moved from that into fire chaplaincy. I was a chaplain for the Central Kitsap Fire Department, or Fire and Rescue. I enjoyed my time there, but it was hard work. It was really hard work. I was in charge of death notifications for the county. So anytime there was an accident, or you know, me and either the coroner or the county sheriff would go to people's houses. And, you know, I learned a lot in those moments about how you can have all the theology in the world. You can have it all figured out. I mean, by that point, I had my MDiv, right? And I knew it all, Bishop. Like I had been to school, right? And clearly, I knew this whole theology thing. What I didn't know was how clingy of a symbol it is to know your theology and have no relationship, right? And so I would have these relationships, or I would build these relationships with people. And what I learned very early on is when someone is going through something painful, and, you know, one of your books specifically talks about this, when someone is going through something painful, the worst thing you can do is give them a Sermon on the Mount, or give them your theological disposition on the Mount of Olives, you know, the discourse on the Mount of Olives, or why evil happens in the world. They don't care about that. That's not what they're looking for, you know. And so a lot of times when I was early on as a chaplain, you know, people would ask me, why would God let this happen? Which is a fair question, by the way. But they would ask me, why would God let this happen? And I would try to come up with some theological answer. You know, God's in control, which, and by the way, I believe that is weak theology. To have that kind of blanket ticky-tack answer, that shows me you have not delved very deep into the realm of interaction with God, which is what theology is, the study of God and and His interaction with us, right? So what I learned over time as a chaplain, though, the best answer you can give is when someone says, why would God allow this to happen? The best answer you can give is, I don't know. I'm not God. I no longer, I'll be honest, I used to. I no longer presume to know the mind of God, right? I've learned through theological study that God is so much bigger than what I think and my boundaries of what theology look like. So much bigger than that. So I would say, you know, I don't know, but we can go through this together. Right? We can go through this pain together. Right? And so, you know, I did that for a couple of years, and then I got assigned as a director of counseling services at a church in Bremerton, Washington. I did that for a couple of years. Then I became the associate pastor at a different church up in Bremerton, Washington, or Chico, Washington. And then when our pastor retired in 2018, I became the lead pastor, and I was the lead pastor until COVID, so until around 2020. So overall, church-wise, you know, I've had up to 2020, I've had about 11 years in ministry. Now I'm at, you know, about 15 years in ministry, and now I lead an online community for what I like to call edge walkers. They're people who love Jesus, but they've been pushed out of every church because they're not going to tolerate the tyranny and the anarchy and the chaos that goes on in a lot of these churches. So, you know, they feel like they don't belong in church. And so I give them kind of a stepping stone. It's kind of like, I like to call it diet church, right? It's a time when you can get resources, come into a community. You don't have to come into a building. We do our services online. A lot of them are on TikTok. and we have consistently about 200-300 people that will come in and out. We don't keep membership because a lot of those things are so traumatic to these people that we just can't do that with them. So that's currently what I do. I've been assigned as the diocesan bishop for the United States for the Ancient Celtic Church, which is a church out of Germany. We're basically a mission here. I mean, that sounds really fancy, but the reality is there's probably like 8 of us in this country. So it's not like, it's not what, when you hear the word bishop, it's similar with you, right? When you hear the word bishop, a lot of people have this idea of what a bishop is, and then there's what we do, which I think is a little more attuned to what the first century bishops did. Right. So that's what I've done and what I'm currently doing. I've also written a number of books. I have not written a memoir yet, so that'll probably be one of the next things I write on. But I typically write about Celtic Christian spirituality. I wrote out, basically a personal theology, a very long 600-page book on Celtic theology, and then I had the opportunity with Bishop Williams to write our book together that we'll talk about here in a little bit. And I just released a couple months ago. It's called The Celtic Journey with Christ, and it discusses the 7 tenets of Celtic Christianity and why we do that. So all that to say, I'm busy. Yeah. I'm not an educator. I'm actually an assistant director where we provide crisis mental health wraparound. So basically program manage all of the major mental health services in the county that we live in. So excited to do that work. That's a ministry in and of itself, bringing hope to people who have none. And so that's what I do now.
Yeah, and so that's what we do, and and we write again for the purposes that I say we write for. But when I always hear this from when we get to writing, I always hear this from people like, how do you start? What do you start writing at? Well, you start by writing. You get an outline. You have a story to tell. All of life is stories, and the Bible is nothing but a book of stories. Stories are what brings us together. Stories what connect people together. The greatest story, Lord of the Rings, whatever story you're talking about, is all about stories, and stories are very important, and we all have a story. Yeah. And so when I start to write, I just said, I'm just going to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I'm doing. You try to get publisher, you try to do it traditional way. But I like with the 21st century is what you can do. It's called self-publishing. You can publish yourself, not worry about any edits and worry about any answering nobody, but telling your story. So you just began by having a story and began framing it, and then just start filling in. But the biggest process is finding the time, finding the space, finding a place to do it. And
I agree.
That's a difficult part for people, and just sitting down and doing it, because it's hard for people to really sit down and put the intellectual energy what it takes to write. They have the story within them. They have it all within them, but getting it out of you and putting that pen to paper, or in this case, typing it is really easier than back in the day to do it. It just discipline is what you got to have. You got to discipline. You got to have a want. You got to have a want to. I say this way. You got to have a want to not let this story that you had to tell die with you. Yeah. Another point I'll make is only you can tell your story.
That's fact.
As much as I love you, as much as you love me, only I can tell my story.
That's right.
And if you don't tell it, it's gonna die with you.
That's right.
And so, should everybody write? No, everybody. I mean, everybody should write, but everybody has a story. Whether you write it or not, that's your choice. That's the next level in life. But and I'll let you this. I wrote my story because I wanted, if people read about my life, I want them to hear my voice. Yeah. I don't want nobody interpreting my life for me, and so that's one of the reasons I read, because, like I said, one day I'm gonna leave this place, and I want to know some people that let a few people know that I came through here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you never know. Actually, I heard this quote the other day. It's actually, when I heard it, I was like, that is solid country gold. It said, a heretic. What was it? A heretic is someone whose book hasn't been out long enough, right? Or a heretic is someone whose, time hasn't caught up with them yet, right? And so I know some of the stuff we write, some of the stuff we say is controversial in church circles, but you know what? So was Augustine. Yeah. So was Irenaeus. So was Origen. So was Martin Luther. So was Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
So was Dr. Cone.
Yeah.
All these guys in the past, unfortunately, a lot of men, very few women. Julian of Norwich, right? Sarah Held Evans. You know, now that she's passed,
Rachel.
people go back.
Rachel.
Her book, or I'm sorry, Rachel Held Evans.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Her books now
Oh, yeah.
are part of the core group of books that people use when they're starting to go through deconstruction, or they're starting to reconstruct their faith, or trying to look at life outside of tyrannical fundamentalist type movements, right? And so her books have become so much bigger than her after her passing, and you never know which one of your books is gonna be that for someone. Yes, I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you and tell you that I don't want to be remembered after I die. Who doesn't? But I think more importantly than that is the message that comes across. The transmission of that message has the opportunity to continue after you're gone. And if you don't write that down, no one's ever going to know. You may have had one of the deepest theological thoughts in the history of humanity, but you never wrote it down anywhere, and no one will ever find it. Yeah.
All the technology we have is still the written word, is still the written text that we remember. I mean, think about it now that people talk through texting. Imagine what this awesome. Imagine people talking through. You talk through text.
Yeah.
And by writing, it's not going anywhere. So you know, we have a pretty extensive library that we have, and also one of the things on our show, in the introduction, we're going to do a lot of book reviews. We'll have a book and we'll review it. We've done some great with Rachel Evans' book, Jesus and John Wayne.
What a great book.
Dr. Cone's book. I mean, several books we went over and really tried to apply it to real life. So that's one thing the chat's can be good for. If you got a book that we might not know of, tell us. We'll review it and we'll talk about it on the show and we'll break it down, because we also did shows and like that with the one show that we've done. So we have we're not in a box. We're not afraid of any platform to deal with, but we thank God for our writing. So we're gonna have a giveaway. We have plenty of copies. This is my first book. My Father's Business, Perfect Revelation. I wrote this was in my amateur days. I wrote this.
Rookie days.
My rookie days.
You had to prove yourself.
My first. And that was my memoir. This one I wrote for my family that I wanted to remember me by, and so I wrote that. I think in 2014. Wow, time goes by fast. So I wrote that, and then this is Bishop Brothers' story. Bishop Brothers, the unlikely likely, and I think the title speaks for itself. Unlikely combination of us, and it's got our seals on it, the Bishop seals on it, and it's a story of how we came together and some awesome things that we have in our lives. It's a real good read. We had this one here. Also, this is my one after Bishop Brothers, Scars. This is when I talk about scars now that I have a scar on my body. Oh man, I'm talking about scars.
If only you'd have known.
Yeah, if only I knew.
Wow.
I probably wouldn't wrote it. Well, I'm gonna give you a scar now. A scar.
Yeah.
So encounters with Jesus. So it's just you know, it starts with a thought. Starts with just putting it on paper and just getting it written, and it's not hard. You can do it yourself. I mean, you can do it professionally yourself. When I say do it yourself, not just throwing things together.
Sure.
Professionally doing it with yourself through, there's plenty of companies out there that help you, that do certain things. They help you with binding, and all this kind of things. If you need any help in that, we can help you.
Yeah, hit us
down
up.
the right path with that. Yeah.
We're very serious about authorship. If you're someone who's seriously thinking about authorship, because it used to be authorship was something for elite people. If you go back 200 years ago, most people couldn't read or write, period. Much less write about things, right? And so, you know, I think in this era, now most people that I talk to, why don't you write a book? Well, it's too expensive. Brother, the last two that I wrote for free. I paid no money down, right? Because I went through KDP Publishing. That's something we can talk about. It's Kindle Direct Publishing through Amazon.
Show you how to do it. We'll break it down. Show you how to do it.
But we'll probably do a show on it too. Definitely do a show on it.
Yeah.
But if you have a question or you looking to do something like that, I don't know. Maybe someday we'll do Bishop Brothers Publishing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, that'd be great. But yeah, I think, you know, for me, The one I haven't read yet is this one right here. Yeah. Cato and Bet. That's a good one. That's what I hear anyway. I haven't.
Yeah.
But you did a children's version of this too,
The
right?
children's version of this, yeah. And I got a copy of the children's version, so we got you covered. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have some great. Give them the names of your book.
Yeah. So the first book I ever wrote, my rookie season, was this book called The Christian Truths of the Pagan Gods. If you can find it, I'd be impressed. It's out of print now. Because I didn't renew the license because it wasn't that great of a book, to be honest. But I tried real hard. Learned a lot of lessons. So that was back in 2012, I think, is when that book came out. And then actually the next book I wrote was Unlikely Likely. All my books have come after Unlikely Likely. Unlikely Likely like stirred something up in me where I was like, man, I want to write a book a year, and I've accomplished that. Although I haven't started the book for this year, and we're already in month 6, so it may not happen this year. But I am working on a dissertation that'll be out next year, so I guess that kind of counts. But so there was Christian Truth of the Pagan Gods, and there was Unlikely Likely, and then after that, I wrote a book called Diget Trechul. That's Irish for Timeless Theology. That's probably the biggest book I've ever written. It'll probably be the biggest book I ever write, just because it was just a lot. So yeah, I wrote Timeless Theology. Then after Timeless Theology, I wrote a little small devotional called Redeeming the River. It talks about natural theology and about how you can find God in a river. You can find God. There are these places called thin places where the veil between heaven and earth is really, really thin, and there's these very special places. For me personally, some of those places would be Enchanted Rock, or if you've never seen Enchanted Rock, it's stunning. The Grand Canyon is another place where I felt that way. Mount Rainier, a sunset through the periscope on a submarine, right? To me, that was a very thin place to see the beauty of that. There's these places in nature where God speaks to us. The Psalms talks about, the heavens declare the glory of God. Night by night, it pours out speech, and I think nature screams at us, God, right? It tells us everything we need to know. So for me, there's the Bible, which is very, very important. It's a very succinct conversation between us and God, and you have nature, which is a more open, more of a feel, vice words. So I wrote that little book, and then after that book, the last book I wrote is The Celtic Journey with Christ, and that one is a little more pointed. It talks about the 7 tenets of Celtic Christianity and why they're important and how we incorporate them and how you can incorporate them into your life. And the book was really to kind of explain Celtic Christianity, although it can be a denomination, it truly isn't a denomination. It's a spiritual practice, right? It actually comes, it's not Irish. Celtic Christianity is not Irish. It actually gets its start in North Africa with the Desert Fathers of Egypt. It's a monastic lifestyle, and we don't do what the monastic fathers and mothers used to do. We don't go live out in the desert and eat locusts, but we definitely have taken lessons from those ways of life and have crafted that around our ways of life and how we interact with God. We see interaction with Jesus as a journey that happens every day. It's not something that happens on Sunday in church. It's not something that just happens when I crack the Bible, when I open my eyes, when I close my eyes, when I walk forward, backwards, when I get in my car. If God is truly immanent, there's no place I can go where God is not.
That's right.
So that's where we're at.
And so we're going to have some giveaways. So this episode we're going to have some giveaways. So if you become a subscriber, DM us and tell you what's a copy of the book, and we'll give some subscribers away. If you share some videos, we'll give you a copy of the book of your choice. Don't have them in stock. We have all these pretty much available. So we'll give you a book just to build up the chat, and then we'll love to be able to do that to you. So this one here, Unlikely Likely, Scars, Caden Beto, and then Bishop G have some from his books he's going to have. So we have a whole show dedicated to it where we're going to do giveaways and get in the chat and actually talk about these books so you can get to know us better through our writing and stuff like that, and then have that's what I'm saying about the chat. In the chat, we ask questions about how to get started, Amazon, KDP, how to find people to do your binding, how to find people to do your book cover.
Fiverr's your friend.
Fiver's your friend. We got good contact with you, so you won't get messing around, so you'll get a good price. But you can self-publish. You can self-publish your own book. You don't have to worry about publishing things like that. So it's something that I think thought of it overwhelms people because they see it and they got in mind, but it's really not a hard process. It's just a matter of getting it done.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing is you don't have to. I mean, we have degrees. We're pretty educated people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have education to write.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've had a lot of people tell me one of the reasons they don't write is because they don't feel like they're experts in the field. And it's, well, I'm not an expert in theology, so I'm not going to write. I'm like, well, first of all, you may not be an expert in the scholastic study of theology, but you are an expert in your theology. You are an expert in how you interact with God. And the unique thing about you and how you interact with God is no one else interacts with the Holy Trinity that way. No one. Like it's a fingerprint, right? And so there are going to be very, very unique things in your story that we all need to know, right? That would be helpful for all of us. Clothes don't make the man, right? Piece of paper doesn't make a man or a woman. You don't have to be an educated person in this field to write a book.
I'm gonna tell you some breaking news too. All these writers you love, whether newspaper, books, and that, there's this thing called an editor. Believe me, what you see here is what I wrote, but it's called edited. I mean, I might say something in 5 words, and the editor may break it down to 2.
Right.
It's called editing. So editing is a process. See, is writing. You just write it. You just put it down, and then you take it to the editing process, and the editor will break it down. And say, okay, let me find your voice, and they will keep your voice. So any newspaper article you read, particularly big name newspaper like New York Times, Boston, you ever heard to say why didn't the editor stop that? Because it's got to go through the editing process to break down. So it's a process. It's not just you write it down on a notebook paper and it just goes up. No, it goes through a process. You do it right, and it'd be very professional and very good where people can read it. And they have they ask you now, a lot of books that maybe Bishop John write, he might have an audience of, you have to write a theological book to write to professors different than you have the common, but they'll tell you based on what your audience is and what you're looking for, how to write. Because Dr. Cone has a PhD, but you can read on the 7th grade level.
Yeah, you can.
But he got some books you got to pretty much be at a certain level to read, but those are his more academic books and stuff like that. So people get intimidated, but once you study the process, they'll tell you how, you know, this book, they break this book down where they can read on certain grade level and stuff like that where it'll come out. And don't worry about your spelling and stuff like that. Just get it down. Just get started. Just get the moving. Get your framework. Get your story. And you can bring it together.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of ways you can skimp on price on a book. The one place, one place you don't. Well, that, you know what? That's not true. The 2 places you don't ever skimp is your illustrator for the front cover and your editor. And let me explain why. You may have the most amazing idea ever, and I learned this. I learned this with my first book because I did my own cover page, I did my own illustrations, and I did my own editing. And that book probably had, before it went out of print, it probably had 4 revisions just on spelling and grammar and those kinds of issues, syntax issues, right? An editor will do that for you. If the editor says, hey, it's going to be $300, it is $300 well spent. It is $500 well spent. It is $1,000 well spent because you think it's perfect, right? You wrote it. Of course you think it's good. Just ask me. I love what I say. Right, but an editor who has his only vested or her only vested interest is in this book looking grammatically correct for the level that you're looking for, because that's what they're judged on when other people see their work. Worth its weight in gold, and in that front cover, because if you don't have a good front cover, you know, don't judge a book by its cover. Everyone judges the book by its cover. Everyone. There's a reason that there's a reason that saying exists. Because everyone judges the book by the front cover. You know, I had a person tell me one time, darker covers with colorful things on it makes it pop, and so it catches eyes, right? And so, you know, I would have known that. I'm not an illustrator. I don't know anything about illustrating stuff. So. You know, those were valuable lessons I learned. But for me, you know, you don't need to pay someone to bind it. Amazon will do that for you. You don't got to pay someone to write it. You're going to write it. do not skimp on that cover or that editor, please.
The editor's job is to make sure what you're trying to say is understood.
Yeah.
Because you can write the greatest book in the world, but if people can't understand it, it's not going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like you said, the cover, and then the back cover too, because what do people do? You've been in the bookstore before.
Yeah.
First thing you get the book, and
You do
then
this, and then you do this,
Yeah, and then
you put it down.
Yeah, and then you hope they take it to the counter.
Yep. and you hope they either come back or pick it up, take it over the counter.
Yeah.
And you run that barcode.
That's right. So it's actually a good process, but it's don't be intimidated by the process. Just learn the process. But so we're gonna have some giveaways, and that's gonna be a good one of our good shows we'll do on books and writing the books, because I believe that a lot of people wants to do it.
Yeah.
They just need that little push to.
Yep. I mean, to me, the hardest part of writing a book was the first chapter. Mm-hmm. Actually sitting down, and I love how you said, you got to find time. No, you got to make time.
Make time, yeah.
You have to create time, because if you don't make time, there's not going to be time.
Yeah.
If you don't start carving out time for you to do it, you will never do it.
Right.
So, and you know what? We talk about everything has a spiritual component. For me, the spiritual component of writing a book is it gets me in a rhythm of discipline. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. It gets me in a rhythm of, okay, so I like the video games. Mm-hmm. I love the Call of Duties. I love going online and having fifth graders beat me up on these things with my other 40-year-old friends, right? Mm-hmm. I love doing that. But when I'm writing, 5 to 7. Whether I get a sentence out or a whole chapter, 5 to 7 p.m., nothing else is on but this laptop. There's no music, there's no nothing. And it starts with, especially if I'm doing a theological work, it starts with prayer, ends with prayer, right? It creates a rhythm, and we're rhythmic people. Yeah.
And everybody does
it different.
James Baldwin wrote upside down. He actually
crazy.
They got pictures of him leaning against the bed. He's actually upside down with legs on the bed, and that's how he wrote. Everybody, my writing comes through stops and starts. I write something, and I've learned in my life, stop what I'm doing and write it, and then I'll go back and fill in later. Yeah. Everybody got a different process. The key is, like you said, making a time when you get that feeling, you get that moment when you get that, put it down on paper, and before you know it, you have what they call a lot of stuff in your manuscript. Yeah. Now it's about putting it together, and framing it and making it make sense. But that's the process. Just write it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, till next time, we'll see you again, and we'll once we get this out, we'll make sure that all the books are in the show notes. Can you find your books on Amazon?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So all my books except that first one. I'll tell you what. If you can find the first one, I'll say it again, The Christian Truth of the Pagan Gods by John G. If you can find that book and take a picture with it, if you buy that book and take a picture with it, I will give you a copy of every one of my books signed. All 5 books I will give you signed. Yeah. Because I would be shocked if you found it. So, and I might ask for it back because it's not a great book. Don't read it. Just take a picture with it.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Till next time.
On the real, oh yeah, this on the real. On the real, oh yeah, this on the real. You know the deal, oh yeah, you know the deal. Just keep it real, just keep it real.